Hello and welcome to the Consulting Career Pivot Panel, Navigating the Transition, hosted by Compassionate Leaders Circle with special guests, Pavan Serpa, Katie Brunning, Ethan Hawks, and Pam Spear. Okay, so like I said, Compassionate Leaders Circle is hosting this panel discussion, and as you can see, the word compassion is in the title of the company. And that is really the driver to everything that we do. And compassion is about being sensitive to another's suffering or pain with the desire to alleviate that. And that's really what drives us. We have a desire to alleviate suffering in the world of work and to bring greater joy into the world of work. And that is what motivated me to pull together this panel of former consultants, because I coach a lot of consultants, and many consultants are in the question of, do I stay, do I go? There's a lot of pros and cons that you have to sort through to figure out what's right for you right now. Okay, so Compassionate Leader Circle, we offer 3 different types of services. We help professionals navigate their career. So if they want to make a career pivot or perhaps up-level their career, maybe start a business. So we offer coaching, individual coaching, one-on-one and group coaching for that. We also offer leadership development for individuals and at the corporate level, and we offer compassionate coach training, compassionate coaching skills training. All right, so I'm Kelly Dwyer, Director of Learning for Compassionate Leaders Circle. I'm your facilitator for the day. I am a leadership, well-being, career coach. I work with business and tech professionals. I have my MBA from Cornell. I have had the pleasure of working for a number of investor-backed companies, 3 of which had successful exits, so those were interesting rides. I started I had my own outdoor yoga adventures business for 3 years, and I've worked across functions in the business. So I understand a number of different areas within a company. All right, so before we jump right into the panel, I wanted to just give you a highlight of our 4 panelists. So these are listed in the order that they introduce themselves in the panel. Pavan Serpa is the SVP of Optimization at ManaPro Products, and that is a private equity-owned CPG company, and he was formerly a consultant with Deloitte. Katie Brunning is a strategy director with DaVita Kidney Care, so that's in the healthcare space. She came from McKinsey & Company. Ethan Hawks came from McKinsey & Company, started a company, got some funding for it, so he is the co-founder and CEO of PlacePass.com. And Pam Spear, formerly at Lenati, doing marketing and sales strategy consulting, is now a senior program manager at Microsoft. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you get lots of value from the panel. Okay?
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be on this panel. And when Kelly first called me, I was, I said yes, even before completing her sentence, because this topic is very passionate, because I went through this whole thought process myself fairly recently. A bit of background about myself. I was working for Deloitte Consulting. I joined Deloitte out of Harvard Business School in 2012, and then I was with them till 2019. I was in their strategy and operations function, specifically focused on supply chain. I started as a generalist, and then, like most of us, or most of the consultants, graduated into, a function area, and I did into supply chain. So I did that fairly, for 7 years, working across industries, working on strategy projects, transformational projects, as well as some, operational efficiency projects. And I've been, thinking for a while, of getting out of consulting, because that's not what I wanted to do long term. And I finally made the move fairly recently, June of 2019. I joined the company which I'm working for now, ManaPro Products. ManaPro Products is a pet nutrition, pet grooming company owned by Morgan Stanley Private Equity. And I work here as part of the executive team, reporting to the CEO, working on strategic optimization projects. So doing a lot of stuff, around improving efficiencies, as well as, thinking through the strategy and all that fun stuff. So that's me.
Thank you, Pavan. Katie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Bruning. I was an engagement manager at McKinsey & Company before I left to consulting. I was there from 2012 to 2016 after getting my MBA. I worked in Washington, D.C. and in San Francisco. I was in the operations consulting line as well. I worked on a variety of things from sales effectiveness, customer experience, lean implementation. At the specialization point in my career, I was working mostly on procurement and a relatively new old function called zero-based budgeting, mostly for CPG and retail clients. In 2016, I transitioned into a strategy role with a field operations division of a major healthcare company. So I work for DaVita. We work on kidney health, which is basically outpatient dialysis services internationally. And then I lead in that operations division, I lead the growth of our home-based dialysis products right now. And so, yeah, I have been out of McKinsey for almost 4 years now and joined DaVita, where I thought I would be for 24 months, and I am still there 4 years later.
Thank you, Katie. Ethan?
Yeah, Ethan Hawks. I was at McKinsey as well, associate partner, 7 years in Chicago. Was a leader in the travel hospitality practice. So think hotels, airlines, car, and some of the newer platforms, like thinking about Airbnb and all that stuff. And then jumped to start my own company, a marketplace for tours and activities. And we power all of Marriott's offering of 300,000 bookable hot air balloon rides, bike rides through Napa Valley, all that stuff, all around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you. Pam?
Kelly. So I was consulting for a firm called Lenati for 8 years, so 2011 through June 2019, similar to Pavan. We did everything from management consulting, change management, to sales and marketing. I spent my first 3 years in telecom and tech, and then transitioned to hospitality for a couple of years, and then over to retail, where I ultimately oversaw our second largest account and led our loyalty and retention practice. So any of the loyalty programs out there that you're using, I may have had a hand in some of those. I kind of grew up through the company, starting as a consultant all the way up to being a senior manager with large sales goals, managing large teams of consultants and specialists, and then also being accountable for that delivery. And in July, I left consulting, which was a huge decision for me to make, having been there since my MBA and a large portion of my career. I'm now working at Microsoft. I'm in a senior program management role on an engineering team, which has been a very large shift for me. But we're focused on content and learning, and specifically I'm working on a free product called Microsoft Learn, where developers and IT pros can go to get all of their learning content and documentation. One thing that really excited me about this role is that it was newly created, and I'm responsible for the growth of an organization.
Thank you. Thank you, each of you. Okay, so you know, when I've spoken with consultants who are in the question of leaving or wanting to leave, or maybe stay, some of the there's a lot of concerns. You get, as a consultant, you get a lot of variety, right? You're working on a large number of different clients and projects over the years, and so one concern is, will I be bored? Is it going to move fast enough for me? Another concern might be, hey, I make a nice living here financially. If I transition into industry, is that going to be, am I going to have to take a cut or something of that nature? So my first question for each of you is sort of a three-parter question. Okay. What was the biggest concern you had about making the transition out of consulting? How did you finally sort of move through that concern, maybe find enough ease around it or courage to take the risk? And then how has that particular concern played out for you in your transition? So Pam, why don't you start us off?
I'd love to. So Kelly took a lot of my talking points here, but my biggest my biggest concerns, one was that I'd be giving up more opportunities to grow. I was like a rocket ship at my last company, continuously growing. I was one of their kind of rising stars, and would I be giving up more of that opportunity to grow was something that was always on my mind, along with the slower pace, less responsibility, and not having a team to support right away. And to work through this, I, casually talked to friends about my desire to switch, and also talked to a couple coworkers, old coworkers that had left. And ultimately, I just decided I needed to put a stake in the ground and just go for it and know that I could always come back, right? I wasn't going to leave on bad terms, so I knew I could always come back. And do you want me to go to your other questions?
Which one's how did it play? Well, I just want to know how did this play out, or how is it playing out for you since you've made the transition?
Yeah. Well, so I ultimately applied to 2 roles through friends where I could write my own job descriptions. So I highly recommend using your network. And I found roles that I would actually be making more money. So that was never really a concern. And the way it's playing out is I am a little bit bored. My role has much lower stakes. It's less fast paced, probably the way work is supposed to be. And it's honestly been an adjustment for me to switch to having lower expectations. I'm an achiever on the Enneagram scale. I like to know I'm doing a good job. I like to see those outcomes, and everything moves a lot slower. And so I'm trying to give myself grace during this time. It's only been 6 months. I'm trying to find stuff to fill that time. So I've become the board president of a nonprofit, and I got a puppy, both of which are taking up a lot of time and energy. And I've also talked to my manager about getting on board, if that's an actual term, and we're going to give me a team of 3 to support coming in this new year, and make it so this role can be more fulfilling for me, because I'm actually quite passionate about it. It's just not moving as fast as I'd like, and I'm somebody that likes to have a lot to do. So we're going to work together on that.
Nice. Thanks, Pam. I like how you're iterating.
Yes.
By being upfront, right? By being upfront, and the fact that, hey, now you can put more time into the nonprofit and have a dog. You wouldn't have been able to have a dog when you traveled like a crazy woman, right?
Nope.
Yeah. Ethan, how about you? So I have a feeling your answer is going to be interesting on this, based on what you shared in our practice session.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern was leaving something safe that felt like knowable. I was enjoying it, kind of knew how to do it. And it felt like I was growing and learning. So that was the biggest concern. It was also, I think, the reason that kind of pushed me to jump and start my own thing, because I knew I kind of did the rocking chair test of like, when you're 80, looking back on life, what are you going to regret? What risks are you going to regret not taking? And realized like I'd always wonder what would have happened if I had, gone out on a limb and given things a shot. So, and then in terms of how it worked out, I feel I've never regretted it for a day. I would say like taking a risk, you either end up happy and that it like works out and achieves all your goals, or you end up like wise because it didn't, and you learn from that. So still unclear where I'll land up on that spectrum, but I feel good that any outcome is a good outcome. Okay, and it's been 3 years since you left? Yeah, about 4. Yeah, 4 years. Now you had said earlier, something like it was like a 2-hour consideration to make the decision. Is that really true? Yeah, definitely. I was heads down, happy with what I was doing. Went out kayaking in Maine with my dad, and he said he thought it would also be fun to job shadow a lobsterman for a day as we were kayaking. And I thought, like, hey, you know what? There should be a way you can do that that isn't awkward of standing around on a dock asking random lobstermen. and that there should be an online marketplace to make that happen. So yeah, that's what I decided, I want to build that, and I'd find that to be a fulfilling thing to do in life.
Wow. And you gave notice how much longer after, or like how long after you had that idea?
Yeah, the next week I hit up all the partners I worked with for funding.
Oh my God. Nice. And you were successful in getting funding.
Yeah, we raised $2 million, a lot from McKinsey partners and other tech execs, and then raised another 12 from Marriott and other big strategics.
Nice. Very impressive. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Katie, what about you? Tell us about your concern, how you finally kind of worked through it, and how it's been playing out.
Yeah, I had a lot of concerns. I think that I was really concerned about money and benefits. I was concerned about career path, in consulting, especially at McKinsey. It is, you put one foot in front of the other and you know exactly where you're going to end up in 8 to 10 years. And that I'm a person that doesn't like uncertainty. I'm not a huge risk taker. And so that is a really attractive way to move through a career to me. And then the third thing that I was really concerned about is, would I find a corporate that had culture? McKinsey has a really strong culture of values and collaboration, and maybe this doesn't get outside to the reputation all that often, but it is a truly supportive place to work, and the kind of place where if you pick up the phone and call a partner or senior partner, on a Saturday afternoon, they will answer the phone, which is both wonderful and a larger problem in and of itself. And so I had a lot of concerns. I have to say, I don't know that I worked through them. I really applied for my current job in a time of being on the emotional low on the roller coaster. And I kind of just said, to heck with it, I'm sending out my resume to an opportunity. And that opportunity is the one that I jumped for. So it was really more about an opportunity being put in front of me rather than my making like this concerted decision that I was going to go look. And I'd like to say that that's what I regret, that I really wish I had done more research, used my network the way that Pam did, made a really, really conscious decision. And the reality is that's quite frankly just not how I've ever moved through life. So it's not really gonna, I can't go back and redo it that way because that's just not who I am. So I did take the opportunity. I really told myself as I was looking that I wasn't looking, that I was perfectly happy at McKinsey and I was just kind of testing the waters. And then lo and behold, I kind of jumped to the first thing that was available. And a couple of things came out of that. One is I definitely make less money. I make a lot less money, and there's a lot less forward momentum on my career path, but that is also a choice that I have made over the last 4 years. I would say the biggest difference in career progression outside of consulting is that you can do it, but you got to hustle. You got to know that you want it. You got to talk to people and tell them that you're going after it. Whereas in consulting, as I said, it's one foot in front of the other and you get there. And over the last 4 years, as I got a little bored or a little bit more used to flexible, I just kept actively taking more and more steps back, although I don't know that I would necessarily classify them as back. And I just kind of said, you know what, I'm not a person that wants to be in this race. I'm a person that has other things going on in my life, and I don't need or want work to necessarily be the first passion in my life. And so that's just a very personal way that I have managed the last 4 years. And so I agree with Pam that there have been moments of boredom, and I made an active decision to embrace that.
Yeah, you started a family, right?
I did. Having a 2-year-old is a great way to ensure that your life is never boring.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Pavan, how about you? Concern, How did you move through it? And how did that play out for you? Now you are a little different. You said earlier you knew all along that consulting wasn't sort of long-term for you. So it was about finding the right opportunity. So kind of elaborate on that, please.
Yes, that's exactly right, Kelly. I knew I didn't want to do consulting long-term. I knew I didn't want to be a partner in a consulting company. So for me, it was more a constant, what's the right opportunity? So the biggest concern for me as I, navigated through this decision making was, hey, is this, the right move? Because at least in my mind, and talking to my friends had this, on their minds as well, is, getting it right first time is an important thing. When you are when you are a consultant working on a broad number of issues, broad number of projects, you have the flexibility to craft your story, and can always, craft your story based on, conversation and based on, the opportunity that comes in front of you. So making sure that is what I wanted to do long term is something that made me nervous, committing to an opportunity. And again, the way I saw it as I was navigating through this exit process is, hey, if I'm going into a functional role, I'll pretty much, be labeled as a functional expert, as I live in that role. And I want to make sure, that's something that I really wanted. So what I did basically is, speak like other panelists who mentioned, had a network of, mentors and friends who I speak and chatted a lot as I said, it took me 7 years for me to get out of consulting and get into my current role. So that's something that I took my time, talking to coaches, talking to friends, making sure, they're challenging me in my thought process as opportunities came by, and keeping me honest to what my long-term goals are. So that's the thing that I did to alleviate my concern. At the end of the day, when I actually made the move, again, I knew I would make the move at some point. So it was not, it was just convincing myself that, hey, this is a right opportunity, and my network of coaches and friends kind of helped me out. And since then, it's been only 6 months, so my answer might change 6 months from now, but based on what I've seen in the 6 months, working for a private equity-backed portfolio company, I would say is a mix of, consulting and operations, especially in my current role. I still am getting to do a lot of stuff, a lot of broad type of projects, starting from strategy to operations and in between. In the last 4 months, I worked on, operational integration plan of an acquisition. I worked on 3-year growth plan. I worked on helping out solve a warehouse transition, and now I'm working on a network optimization. So the width of projects that I'm doing has been pleasantly surprising for me. I kind of knew it, but the width is great. And the exposure that I had has been great as well. And someone else mentioned about, learning and, getting bored as well. That was a concern for me as well. But having lived the last 6 years, it won't be a concern for a PE-backed portfolio company, is my observation. You have more than enough, like you had when you were a consultant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now my next question, I'm just going to open it up to see if there's anything that hasn't been surfaced around this next question that you want to add, because you might have touched on it. I think each of you might have touched on it. But so when you were in your consideration phase and you were leaving, thinking about leaving, what were the most helpful actions you took to get to a decision? So is there, you mentioned the networking, just kind of putting it out there. I guess, Ethan, in your case, you're like, well, let's see if I can get funding for this idea.
Yeah.
And then Pav, go ahead.
Yeah, go with your gut is how I would describe. I made the decision. It was not a logical consultative rationalization.
Okay, go with your gut. I love it. Katie, would you say that was kind of yours too? Go with your gut?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it definitely was. Yeah.
Okay. Pam or Paman?
Yeah, I would add something to what Katie said. You know, she didn't take her dream job, and I didn't do a full job search either. I made the decision to leave after getting confirmation from my current situation that I wasn't going to be shown a clear career path. So I left out that my firm was acquired by a private equity-backed technology firm called ProKarma, and so my company was going through this large transition, and here I was, you know, the top salesperson when I left, and I wasn't getting recognized, and I wasn't getting shown this path, even though I kept asking for it. And so I was kind of being told by my company, like, we don't know what to do with you right now. And I have a ton of empathy for them because they were going through change. But I decided, all right, I'm going to leave, and I can always come back. And I just went and found a job that sounded interesting. And I had a lot of coworkers leave shortly after me and now within the year who were waiting to find their dream job, and it often doesn't exist. You know, for some it might, but I think it's this concept that we all say there has to be this dream job, but I think there's just tons of opportunity out there, and you can always make a change, and to remember that and not put so much pressure on yourself. And even my manager was like, well, if you stay here for a year, that's a win for us. So I'm thinking about what my next change is in the next 6 to 12 months within Microsoft. Right. But I have this opportunity to move around.
Great. Thank you.
I'll add one more thing, Kelly.
Okay.
When I was, before my emotional sending of my resume off, when I was having kind of peer-to-peer trusted conversations about, hey, should I stay or should I go? What I found helpful, because everybody wants to know, well, what are you going to go to? And I didn't have, like Pam just said, I did not have a dream job, and I didn't have one in mind even. I didn't know. I'd worked for every industry there was almost, in a ton of different functions, and not one of them was I like, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So trying to answer the question of what do you want to do next I felt really stymied by that question. And so when I was, the most helpful peer-to-peer conversation that I ever had was, what kind of experience do I want my next job to be? And I talked a lot about wanting to find culture. I wanted to find a job that had culture, that had the flexibility that I was missing. And I kind of named just things that I wanted from the job for myself that weren't necessarily about the job. They were about the situation. And after listening to that, my peer actually is the one that introduced me to DaVita, the company, which I had never heard of, which is in healthcare, and the only industry in which I had never worked at McKinsey or before. And so it's not something that would have even been on my radar if I were telling people what kind of job that I wanted. And so talking about the experience of the organization for me was a different way of getting at more opportunities that I thought I'd be happy in.
Great, thank you.
I just echo everything that was said, Kelly. In my case, I followed a bit more structured, process. I mean, I didn't know exactly that CPG was on the list of industries that I would consider. So was technology, and again, they don't go together, but that's why I was torn. What should I do after consulting? And I worked a lot with a career coach to help answer a number of questions, have a dialogue, and that helped me a lot. To realize what I really want to do, and what how my career would shape out depending on what I do, and that led me to where I am. Although this particular opportunity was not from a structured search, I got a random call which fit all the criteria that I was looking for, and it worked out well. But yeah, that was how I navigated.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so I would love to also, I have another question. And before we jump into that, for all of the attendees, so anyone who is listening via phone or is on video, I would love to get your questions answered as well. So you should have a Q&A. If you move your mouse around on the video screen, there should be some options that pop up towards the bottom, and there should be Q&A in there. So click in there and please enter a question, whatever you'd like to have answered by the panelists, because I want this to be as valuable for you as possible. All right? All right, so I guess the next question that I have for each of you is, what's been the biggest surprise for you? Like the biggest, I guess could be positive or negative, but what's been the biggest surprise that you did not expect at all since you've left? And whoever wants to jump in first, go for it.
I'll jump in. I have 3. So delivery is so much less rigorous, and I don't know why this is a surprise, because I came from consulting at industry, but they are missing frameworks and storytelling, and it absolutely drives me mad. But then I've been able to turn this into an opportunity to add frameworks to what different teams are doing, add that storytelling, and that actually has benefited me in great ways, to the point where I presented to Scott Guthrie, head of all of Azure, who reports directly to Satya. And so that was just a surprise to me, like just the rigor around that storytelling. 2 other surprises that have been a little bit more difficult for me to work through. One is the importance of culture. So like Katie said, I came from a company that had an amazing team culture, an amazing company culture. It was all about the people, and I had such a fun team, and we traveled all over the world together. And I think there's no better way to bond with people than fun travel, crazy travel stories, whatever it is. And I've landed on a team that doesn't have team culture. It's actually remote first. And so I work from home a lot, and I realized that I miss that team feel. And so one of the things I'm going to look for at my next role at Microsoft is going to be the team feel, potentially that culture, over the actual work that I'm doing. Because I'm finding that I actually go hang out at my old office to be with my old coworkers, probably more than I should, because I miss that team culture.
Great, thank you. Ethan, Pavan, any surprises? Okay.
I think in that same thread, I think I was surprised that consulting prepares you well for whatever you want to do next. I think on a few dimensions. One is just having the confidence to approach a problem and break it down and think your way through it. 2 is to influence stakeholders and then set priorities. So, and then 3rd would just be the network and the insights that you pick up by seeing a lot of industries and connecting dots. I think it actually is a great launching pad as promoted. So that was my kind of pleasant surprise.
Thank you.
I agree with that surprise. I would also say a pleasant surprise that I had is that the people that I work with at DaVita are just as talented and interesting and pleasant people to be around as the team that I had at McKinsey. And so that has been amazing. There is a lot more variation, in talent, because I'm in an operations division that goes all the way down to frontline people with their very first career opportunity ever, coming out of, say, nursing school. And all the way up, I get to interface quite a bit with the C-suite. So I see a lot of variety, but I am not disappointed by the intellectual rigor of the people around me, by their caring and compassion, and by just being interesting people, both at work and outside of work.
Yeah. For me, I was going back and forth between what I should sell, but I'll pick the negative one. Something I was probably too naive. I don't want to use the word politics, but I think that's the best word to describe it. But personally, working in consulting, you work with a team that comes together, solves a problem, and gets, parts and goes on to work with other projects. So there is no history to relationships, no history to, working together, or there is minimal history. But in industry, obviously, for good or bad, human beings being human beings, there is, a lot of emotion involved that goes along with the day-to-day work. And for me, that was a shock. And I was a bit naive not to expect that. But again, I don't regard Manipro as a political organization, but, there are always these pockets that I had to learn navigating through to get work done. So that was, a pleasant, not pleasant, but a surprise that I did not expect. But that does exist in industry.
Yeah, I saw Katie. I saw you nodding. Any thoughts on that topic? Katie or Pam or Ethan?
Yeah, I honestly think that that's why it goes quite a bit slower, right? Is because, and I think about it, it's not so different from when you, as a consultant, I had to interact with the clients. I had to know that my client had been in their role for the last 20 years, that this was their safety and security that I was messing with as a consultant, coming in and telling them how to do their job differently. I guess the difference now is that I don't have the mandate to change that person's job the way that I did as a consultant. And I am going to be working with that person for the foreseeable future. And so it's not a relationship that I can afford to leave too much friction on. And so it is a different way of approaching relationships in industry than it was when I was a consultant, even not just between myself and my peers within McKinsey, but even between myself and the client. It's just a very different relationship. And so things move slowly because bringing people on board, often with no mandate to do so, takes time. And so I spent the entire first year in my new role building relationships, feeling like I wasn't accomplishing anything, even though everybody around me was telling me I was doing a great job. But that paved the way for the last 3 years to be able to move and make the changes that I wanted to make. And so I just had to be really cognizant of that, and I had to work at it longer than I would have even been allowed to as a consultant. I wouldn't have been allowed to work on a relationship for a year, until you're in the upper echelons working with the CEO or something.
I think this point on politics is real in that as a consultant, you see larger organizations, and personally, I didn't find a lot of them compelling because you do see people trapped for 20 years with little upward movement, or it's a much elongated career path. As you evaluate options, I would encourage you to think about smaller companies that are in high growth mode, just because there's less pre-existing relationships, it's all hands on deck kind of environment, and you just grow into the opportunities more naturally than if the way you progressed is some guy in front of you has to move on. So there's a lot to like about, I think, startups, smaller organizations from that perspective, and I think your skill set can be more valuable to an organization that might not have an MBA in the company.
Great. Any thoughts on the politics, Pam, or not so much?
There's a lot of politics at Microsoft, like any firm, and I'm just trying to stay out of it. But I have found that challenging. But I also have found that my kind of consultant way of navigating things has helped me stay out of it, right? That was your job as a consultant, to listen to everything they say, the good, the bad, and find opportunities. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But I've also made sure to have a voice and say that I'm not going to get involved in it. And I've forced my upper management, when they do tell me stuff like that, to handle it themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, there is a question that came in from one of the participants, the attendees. He says, in consulting, we do so many different roles, PMO, product owner, tester, functional, et cetera, but don't develop any specific role in depth. When we want to move back into industry, the jobs are posted as specific roles with certain level of in-depth experience. How do you decide what to go with and justify, and how do you justify the lack of in-depth experience? Whoever feels like they have something to say to that question, feel free to speak up.
I will say that observation led me to really fear starting the job search. So I totally understand where this participant is coming from. And so I think two things. Like Ethan, I have found that when you are talking to people and you say, I've been a consultant at McKinsey for 4 or 7 years, or Deloitte or wherever, amazing doors get open to you. Because the reality of work is that if you can think in frameworks, break down problems into bite-sized chunks, and write an action plan, you are ahead of like 60% of the people out there. And so the skill set of consulting is I have found a much more valuable skill set than I was personally placing on that when I was thinking about doing my job search. And so the second thing I would say is that because that is intimidating, and because it's often not clear how to get that across in, say, a cover letter, I'd go back to what the other 3 panelists said, which is using your network is going to be a more effective way to find your next job than searching job sites. I mean, we all know that that's true no matter what, but I think that is ridiculously true when you have a skill set that leaves you, in the 99th percentile on thinking and organizing information and communicating, and maybe on the lower percentile of, I have done this marketing thing for the last 5 years. And so I think using your network is much more critical when you're trying to leave consulting.
This is one thought, but someone told me, so I'll relay it, because I'm not sure I agree with it, but I think I do, is that you get rewarded for being at a consultancy for like 2 to 4 years. You develop hard skill sets, soft skill sets, but then the market doesn't really know what to do with you between like years 4 to 7 of you start pricing yourself out of a lot of jobs, and then it kind of comes back when you're like, I don't know, a senior partner of, okay, you can be slotted into an executive role. So that shouldn't necessarily drive your decision making, but there are a lot of jobs that will eagerly take someone who's been at a consultancy for 3-4 years. That if you expect to make the same as you're making 7 years in, or they're like, okay, you seem we don't really want you to learn the functions of those jobs, or you're going to be impatient. So anyway, that's just one. I think it does depend on when you're jumping of what types of roles are interesting out there.
That's an interesting point. Pavan, did you start to say something?
I was saying exactly what Ethan was saying. It depends on the role and the type of job. Yeah.
Cool, Ethan. That was an interesting. As someone who hasn't been a consultant, it was kind of an interesting insight into that concern around the financial piece, right? Now I know none of you, Pavan, Ethan, Katie, Pam, are approaching retirement. However, we have a question from a participant who is, she's been in consulting, and she wants to know, what are your thoughts around, like, what advice might you have for someone who is looking to slow down a little bit, and who might be moving a little closer to retirement? Any ideas or thoughts on that?
I would say find a role that you still find fulfilling, but that is is going to be slower paced without asking that question explicitly, and also look for a company that has the benefits that you're going to want as you move towards that period, right? Is it a company that has great 401k match, and especially as you're later in your career, where it ramps it up? I mean, Microsoft, right, is known for its benefits around that. But I would say it's not much different. Honestly, we're all looking for something at each point of our career, and I think a lot of us we're looking to slow down as we made the jump and make other things a priority. And so I think just make sure you have your priorities set before you go on your job search.
Thank you.
I will add, if at all possible, I am a fan of working in teams. You can't not be. But I enjoy the fact right now that my team are peers and above. I have no direct reports and I'm an independent contributor. This is the life. I am telling you, if you want to retire or slow down, independent contributor. Team management is lovely and exhausting and takes a lot of effort and time. And I am able to craft my calendar differently because that I don't have that dependent relationship. It's easier for me to take time off. It's easier for me to work in the morning and then later in the evening if I have something to do. So my very practical suggestion would be look for that kind of role.
Great. Thank you. That is very practical. Appreciate that. Okay, so any other questions from the attendees? So I think we've answered everything that was in the queue. If you have any other additional questions, put it in the queue and we'll get it answered before we finish up. Now, I have one more question for each of you, but before we go to that, I want to share an opportunity with the attendees. So if obviously you're thinking about transitioning, right? You're thinking about making a career transition of some kind. And I'm a coach and I have a class that I've taught this class for years. And it starts February 18th and it's an 8-week, basically career accelerator program that is specifically designed to help you figure out what's next and to move into action around that. And we meet 8 Tuesday evenings. You can do it live. I record the classes. You can watch the classes and do it kind of at your own pace. If you can't participate one Tuesday, if a client meeting comes up or something. We use the method that we use for this program is called the Donnellan method. It was created by my colleague, Laurel Donnellan, and it has 12 different principles and practices, and there's an accompanying workbook that goes along with it, that goes along with this this method. And so it's a curriculum basically that we layer on top of the group coaching that happens in the weekly sessions. And there's the outcomes, right, are that you can basically focus on finding meaningful work. So it's a structured process, right, to help you find that vision for what's next for you. You'll work on a project that's related to your soul work. So you'll hear me, so you see soul work. Soul work we define as the absolute best use of your passions and purpose. And that's really what we're here to support you in doing. You'll find greater clarity and confidence and you're gonna get into action. So it's every Tuesday starting February 18th for 8 weeks from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We use Zoom. We don't use Zoom webinar. We'll just use the regular Zoom web conferencing. You get the workbook and the specialized curriculum. We'll have a private group for communication. Each person gets, that's not listed on here, but each participant also gets a one-on-one private coaching session with me that you can use prior to the start of the program, during the program, or just after the program. and there are pre and post program assessments where you can kind of measure your progress. So in terms, before we get back to the kind of the final round of questions with our panelists, I just wanted to offer this up to you. You can connect with me for a 45-minute, what we call a soul session. And it's an opportunity for you to experience some coaching, and maybe you can, and hopefully, you know, the aim is that you walk away with some value from that session to help you move forward in your career pivot, or you can just go ahead and register for the program. And I've asked my colleague gave me a discount, so you can use the code PIVOT200 to get $200 off the course, and that's for the folks that have participated today, and it expires January 24th. Okay, so there's my pitch. Coming back to the panelists. All right, so the final question that I have for you is, I would ask each of you to finish this sentence, and you can finish the sentence and then add a couple more sentences if you want to. But if I had to make the transition all over again, knowing what I know now, I would do what? Pavan, what? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have done it sooner. I mean, it's 7 years. I was in consulting, but I would have done it sooner, maybe after 4 years. I would still do the consulting, but I would do it after 4 years.
Thank you. Ethan.
Yeah, I'd take Kelly's course. In all seriousness, I really do think it helps to have a framework and structured set of like safe conversations where you can work through and reflect. It just gives you so much more, I think, confidence when you do make the decision that it's the right decision. And I think it's really healthy to like know what are you moving to and what are you moving from, and really feel at peace with that.
Thank you. Katie.
I would be kinder to myself in the first year after transition. I think if at 1 year out, I looked back and realized that I had not allowed myself to truly feel and consider what losing that job meant, and that it was hard to deal with the first year of my new job. Like any role, you get very used to, okay, I know how to do this job. I know how to communicate with my coworkers and my superiors, and I have this identity that has been quite well wrapped up in McKinsey for the last 4 years, and I think I was frustrated a lot more than I needed to be in my first year, that I was having trouble letting go of some of those things. And so I think looking back, I regret not just breathing through that for the first year, and now that I know how much better it gets, I would say don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in that when you first leave.
Thank you. A little bit of grieving, right?
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to grieve. Yeah. Pam?
I would have done a better job of identifying what I'm looking for in this new role. I've kind of talked about this a little bit, but culture is really important to me, and I'm on a team that just doesn't really have that. And so I would have done a better job of laying that out. And having now been on this panel, I also would have made more connections of people that were maybe one step ahead of me, and wished I had called Katie a few times. Plan to call her now, because she's kind of felt a lot of the things that I felt. So I think really relied on the ex-consulting network as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, Pam and Katie and Ethan and Pavan, thank you so much for your time. I really, 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 really appreciate you being willing to do this and to show up and to share of yourselves. And for everyone that attended live today, I hope this was of value for you, and for everyone watching, after the fact, because we are recording this. So thank you, and be well. I guess this is it. Any final words? Final words?
Good luck.
All right. All right, you all. Thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.